These 5 habits completely changed my life. And no, I'm not going to tell you to start journaling. I'm not going to tell you to start meditating. I'm not going to tell you to start doing zone 2 cardio, doing ice baths. None of that. I'm probably going to tell you something that you haven't heard in a while. I really hope that you get something out of this video because this did completely change my life and I hope it can change yours as well. This will be about a 20-minute video, maybe 25 minutes. If you can't sit through a 20 to 25-minute video that's going to completely change your life, then there's no point in even trying. That being said, let's get into the video. Alright, the 5 habits that changed my life. Hopefully these can change your life as well. Let's get into it. Before we start, I hope if you're watching this channel, you have big goals, right? You want to become a much larger, much greater version of yourself. So if you do, you probably want to be building something like the Burj Khalifa, right? This is the biggest building in the world. It's absolutely monstrous. This will be like you by the time you're done chasing your goals. The problem is, most of us are trying to build a Burj Khalifa on a pile of shit. Our foundations are terrible. What we start on, our baseline, is just appalling. And so we end up trying to build the Burj Khalifa, but we end up building a Jenga tower. And it all just comes crashing down and you're just going to have to start all over again. So, as much as this might disappoint you, these aren't 5 habits I've added to my life. These are 5 habits I've removed. And removing these has allowed me to create the foundations to start adding in and building the Burj Khalifa, okay? Because no matter how great the habits that you add are, if you have a pile of shit as your foundations, as your baseline, you're only ever going to build a Jenga tower. Alright, that being said, the first habit that changed my life was getting politics, current affairs, the news out of my life completely. Literally going from consuming this stuff hours a day probably to not consuming it at all. Literally zero consumption of this at all. Once every 2 or 3 weeks, I'll ask one of my friends, like, what's happening in the world of politics? And they'll basically say something along the lines of basically nothing, right? Because there's a whole lot of noise, but there's not a whole lot that actually happens. The issue with politics and the news that I found when I was consuming it is the first thing is that it makes you feel just terrible all the time. And why is that? Like, if we look at the news, what gets broadcasted in the news, you can basically boil it down into just people dying, right? All the news is wars that are going on, if there's been some massive plane crash, if there's been some sort of, virus outspread that's, hurt people, killed people, it will be school shootings, some sort of mass murder, some sort of terrorist attack. It's always something bad, and it usually boils down to people dying. Maybe some celebrity that you haven't thought about in 20 years is dead, something like that. But it's basically all just people dying. And when you listen to that like an hour every day or half an hour every day, it just kind of bums you out a little bit. It just makes you feel a little bit terrible. So why would you want that in your life? And the same with politics. Like, it's very rare that you're going to hear in politics people going, this politician's so amazing, he's so great. Realistically, they're saying, he's the devil, he's the worst person in the world. And you just end up sitting on your couch crying. The next thing is that you just start worrying about really dumb things. Just things that are just so far out of your control, so far disconnected from your life, that it just seems so ridiculous to care about. A good example for me was back in 2020. I was 18 years old. I was at university, first year of university in Australia as an Australian citizen, and I was really, really, really concerned with the US election. What was going on in the US election? Okay, I probably spent 2 or 3 hours every single day consuming news, consuming YouTube videos, just about everything to do with this election, okay? Whether, how is this going to affect the polls in this way? Or, how did this candidate mess up here? I spent hours and hours and hours on this, and then the election rolled around, and the election happened, Biden won, and then nothing. Nothing about my life changes. There was nothing that I could have done with any of that information. I just basically had to sit there and consume. An outcome happened that I couldn't control, and that was that. But I spent a huge amount of mental resources and time thinking and worrying about such a stupid thing that was so far out of my control. And I mean, a US election, I mean, that can be relatively impactful on your life, even if you do live in Australia. But even then, you have no control over the outcome, so why bother? And I think there's a lot more stupid things that people are worrying about than a US election. But even that is ridiculous to worry about, especially if you're not a US citizen. The next thing is that you just brainwash yourself. I mean, why are there only two opinions in the world? When you really think about it, the chance that even two people, right, in a room are completely aligned on 50 different topics that are completely unrelated is almost impossible. Yet, it seems like half the world agrees with each other, and then the other half of the world agrees with each other, and there's nothing in between, right? There's two opinions. How does that happen? Well, it happens because you're consuming too much politics and news. You're listening to someone's interpretation of what's going on, and then you're basing your fundamental beliefs around that. These aren't your opinions. You're regurgitating someone else's opinions. Like, when I talk to someone about politics, I'm not really talking to them. I'm talking to Ben Shapiro, okay? Or I'm talking to CNN. But I'm not talking to them. I'm not hearing them. It's not like they've received some sort of objective information and then sat in a quiet room and meditated and thought about that and thought about their position on it. They've just gone, oh, he said this, so yeah, I kind of trust this guy, so I'm just going to believe that. And then you end up brainwashing yourself. I don't really want to brainwash myself, so it doesn't really make sense to me to watch politics and the news. Okay? If you want to be an independent thinker, it's quite hard to do that when you're consuming other people's beliefs all day. The next one is that it makes people hate you. If you hold one opinion, half of the world is going to hate you. If you hold the other opinion, half of the world is going to hate you, okay? There's no way around that. People just aren't going to like you based on your opinions because, like it or not, half of the world doesn't agree with you, okay? And it just makes people dislike you when you're brash and bold about your political opinions, which aren't even your opinions. They're the opinions of people that you listen to. So it makes people hate you. Probably not a good reason to be consuming politics and news. And last one, the average person spends about 9 hours a week consuming politics and news. 9 hours a week? If you were struggling to get in shape, for example, let's say you thought, I really want to be in great shape, but I don't have the time. Well, you're spending 9 hours a week feeling terrible, worrying about stupid things, brainwashing yourself, and making people hate you. Maybe you should reallocate those 9 hours into exercise because you don't even need 9 hours a week to get in great shape, okay? But you're wasting it on this stupid stuff. So one of the biggest habits that I did was getting rid of politics and news, and I strongly recommend it. But that was the first one. Number 2 is quitting video games. I was quite a big gamer back in the day. I played a lot of video games, particularly like FIFA or Call of Duty, and it consumed a huge amount of time. And there's quite a lot of reasons that video games are really bad. There's quite a lot that are actually more sinister than they first appear. But essentially, a video game is just consuming a movie with characters that you can control, that is designed to be as stimulating as possible to keep you playing for as long as possible, right? That's all a video game really is. The best video games are just the most stimulating and keep you wanting to play for the longest. That's all it really is, okay? But the big problem with video games, I think particularly for me, was it provides fake progress, fake status, and fake achievement. So all of us have this innate drive for progress, status, and achievement, okay? But what happens when you play video games is that it feels like you're making progress. It feels like you're achieving status. It feels like you're achieving something when you're not achieving anything. You're sitting on your ass, moving your thumbs around. But your brain doesn't know the difference. Remember, the light bulb has only been around for 150 years, okay? We're not even used to artificial light in our biology, let alone being able to control little humans with our thumbs, okay? So when you numb this or you sedate the progress, status, and achievement centers in your brain, what happens is your brain's going to go, I've made sufficient progress today. I've increased my status sufficiently today, and I have achieved a sufficient amount of things today that I don't need to do anything else. That's good for me. I feel satisfied. So then you don't actually try and pursue anything to actually make real life progress or real life status or real life achievement. And you've just numbed all this sensation in your brain. So you just go, man, cool, I'm fine. Okay? That's actually pretty shocking. I definitely noticed when I removed this, I realized that I had such a deep drive for these things that I'd just been sedating. And it was kind of like letting the tiger out the cage, okay? You actually start to go and pursue things. So, yeah, quitting video games, massive one. The next thing is it destroys your attention. As I said before, video games are designed to give you as much stimulation as possible. They're there to just give you the dopamine. And what happens when it's giving you the dopamine is that it's reinforcing you to want quick rewards, want easy things. And that is going to absolutely ruin your attention span and ruin your dopamine in the progress. And when you ruin your dopamine and destroy your attention span, you're not really going to have much motivation to do anything except for compulsive things. Things that are there that I can just immediately get and feel good for. And when you're doing that, you're thinking short term, you have no attention span, no motivation, coupled with the fact that you've already satiated that feeling of progress, status, and achievement. You ain't going to want to do anything. You're just going to be like, cool, I'm good, I'll kick my feet up, I've had a good day today. I've just killed 7 woolly mammoths. That's what my brain thinks anyway. So I'm cool. I don't need to do anything. And yeah, the average person spending 8 hours and 30 minutes a week on video games, for me, it was a whole lot more than that. But it's just a total, it's a sham. You should not be playing video games. That was probably one of the biggest things that I quit. The biggest habits that changed my life was quitting video games, because video games did change my life, just not in a good way. The next one is removing junk food. I really see, at this point, I see eating junk food or just eating food in general as almost a business decision. Because at the end of the day, the inputs you put into your body is going to affect the outputs. Particularly, it's going to affect your energy levels. So if you eat something like a bag of Doritos, what's going to happen is you're going to get a big spike and then a big crash. If you have a huge crash and you feel like shit for the rest of the day, how likely is it that you're going to do things that you intended to do? How likely is it that you're going to work in the afternoon or you're going to go do that workout, right? Probably significantly less. So that's kind of why I see eating food as a bit of a business decision. Obviously, junk food is going to make you fat if you eat it in excess. I don't think anyone can really argue with that. If you excessively eat junk food, you're going to get fat. Obviously, getting fat's probably not such a good thing, because when you're fat, the only thing consistent about your energy is it's going to be consistently low. You're probably going to have low self-esteem as well, not feel great. Probably not a good idea to get fat if you can avoid it, which you can. The next one is it makes healthy food taste worse. It would be kind of like me going outside and just staring into the sun for 5 minutes, and then you showed me the most beautiful painting in the world. I'm not going to see anything, right? It's not going to look beautiful. It's just going to look like a blur, okay? That's because you're eating this crazy stuff. Well, the reason that is because you have so much stimulation from the sun, so much light coming in, that when you try to perceive anything else, it just seems mundane in comparison. So the same thing is with eating junk food. If you have something that's so stimulating that is just designed to taste as good as possible, when you try and eat anything that's not that, it's just going to taste worse in comparison, obviously. So it makes healthy food taste worse. And if healthy food tastes worse, then you're probably less likely to eat healthy food, and you're more likely to eat junk food, which is not a great idea. And that, of course, causes the cravings. And if you're going to crave this food more, you're going to eat it more. And if you're going to eat it more, you're going to get more fat. You're going to have inconsistent energy. It's not great. The last one is it ruins your skin. Sure, there's like vanity reasons you want good skin. Like, obviously having better skin is going to be good. But the quality of my skin, I see as like a marker of how well I've done in terms of looking after my health. Because anything that you do that makes your skin worse realistically just means you've done something wrong internally, because your skin is a very good reflection of your insides, of what's happening within your body, your internal health. So everything you do that makes your skin worse is probably something that's damaging your health. And I think this is a pretty clear sign that junk food is not good for you. Not that I think you needed any reason for why junk food is bad for you. As we've discussed, it's not great. But the third habit that I removed was junk food, and that definitely changed my life. Number 4 was quitting scrolling. This was a big one, okay? When we think about what scrolling really is, okay? Scrolling is effectively watching a movie that is highlights of someone's life condensed into 30 seconds to a minute, which was edited to make it as highly stimulating as possible, that has been delivered to you in a way that is algorithmically designed to provide as much stimulation as physically possible. And you're consuming this for hours a day. That is not very smart. That is not a smart thing to do. We talk about how video games destroy your attention, ruin your dopamine, and you lose motivation. This is like video games on steroids. This is like the heroin of digital products, right? This is so highly stimulating. It's so immediate, so quick, that all that happens is that you just go, oh, so to feel amazing, I have to reach into my pocket, pull out my phone, and start scrolling. That means that everything in comparison sucks. You talk about how eating junk food makes healthy food taste worse in comparison. Scrolling just makes life worse in comparison. It makes literally every part of your life more shitty. I don't want that, okay? Destroys your attention, ruins your dopamine, and you'll lose your motivation. And of course, when you've trained your brain to feel really good for just swiping your finger up, just doing things impulsively, you've basically just trained yourself to become impulsive, to do things that get you immediate good feelings, which is not a good idea. The last thing that is that, or the next thing, is that you start to live your life through other people, okay? You start to live the lives of people you may have never even met before, the little micro condensed highlights of people's lives. I don't want to do that. I don't want to live the lives of other people. I'd rather live my own life, okay? And the last one is you're viewing a false reality. It's not like these accurate lives. This is highly edited, designed to show off the best parts of people's lives. And what happens is you start to compare yourself to other people and you go, well, I'm 21 years old and I don't have a Lamborghini, so I'm a complete failure. My life is terrible in comparison to this 15-year-old kid who's got a Lamborghini and a penthouse in Dubai. My life must suck. You're viewing a false reality. You're not seeing the fact that that penthouse was rented for a day, the Lambo was also rented, and it was split between 5 other people. You're viewing a false reality, okay? And it's ruining your attention, ruining your dopamine, losing motivation, just making you a shittier version of yourself. Before I continue to the last one, if you guys are a digital entrepreneur and you would like help removing these things so you have more time, more attention, and more focus to grow yourself and your business, then I'll leave a link in the description below. You can check that out and I'll see if I can help you. Otherwise, let's go to the last habit that I removed. And this is the biggest one. This was the biggest habit that I removed. And that was actually alcohol. This was a personal one for me. I never had an alcohol problem, but I went to university in Australia. I was a young person in Australia. Everyone drinks a lot. So I ended up drinking a huge amount of alcohol. I mean, I would probably drink about north of 50 beers a week, right? And that's over the course of maybe 3 nights. Okay, so I would basically get hammered 3 days a week. And then the other 4 days were just spent recovering from a ridiculous hangover. So it was not good. And what I noticed, and what I even said to myself when I was drinking, is that this is the biggest thing holding me back, and that's alcohol. There's a lot of reasons for that. The first one is that you just make dumb decisions, really, really dumb decisions. You do things that you would never, ever ordinarily do. And the worst thing is when you wake up and you didn't even know about it, and then someone says, you just did the dumbest thing. And of course, because you're hungover, that is depression. That does not feel good. The next thing is you're literally poisoning yourself. You are literally putting poison into your body. That is what alcohol is. It's poison that affects your brain so that you feel a little different, okay? And it makes you do stupid things. Then you feel depressed for 2 days afterwards, okay? Maybe like the first day is particularly bad of the hangover, but you're definitely not operating 100% after the second day. Even after the third day, you're not operating 100%. And so for me, if I was drinking on Wednesday night, that would put me out of action and certainly not operating at full potential until Friday. And then Friday, I get hammered again. So Friday, I get drunk, feel pretty shit on Saturday, feel pretty shit on Sunday, then drink on Sunday, and then you feel terrible on Monday and Tuesday. And then for the day on Wednesday, maybe you get some work done. And then the cycle starts all over again. So you're never operating at full capacity when you're drinking, okay? Especially if you're drinking a lot. But even then, you're knocking out quite a few days where you're not operating at full capacity. And if you're trying to run a business, if you're trying to build something that is going to create that freedom for you, then you certainly don't want to be operating under your potential. The next thing is it is just expensive. Like, drinks out cost a lot of money. I mean, when I was doing it, I would basically just drink at home. Not by myself. I never drank by myself. But like, you would go to house parties and you drink at home. But even then, it's like, you know, $50 a night, which is not cheap when you're young. But then going out and getting drinks, it's, you know, $10, $15 a drink. That's really, really expensive. This is most young people's biggest expense is drinking, okay? And probably not a good idea to be wasting your money on literal poison. The next thing is that it ruins your skin. I mean, this thing ruins your skin more than anything. In my opinion, there's no amount of junk food I could eat that would ruin my skin worse than just a night out of drinking. And that's just alarm bells to me that this is really, really bad for me. This is pretty shocking. And I talked with some of my friends about this, and we seem to all agree that there's nothing that can ruin your skin worse than alcohol. The next one is it also makes you fat. So just like junk food, ruining your skin, removing alcohol, adding alcohol, having alcohol, will make you fat, okay? Simple as that. You know the expression, the beer belly? That is because alcohol is quite high in calories, especially when you're drinking a lot of it, okay? So you're going to get fat on top of that, and that is going to give you less energy, which means you're probably less likely to do work and exercise, probably lower your self-esteem, make you feel worse about yourself. That's probably not great between the ears. The last one, which is actually quite an interesting one, is that you end up developing relationships that are exclusively for the purpose of drinking. How many friends, this goes out for you guys that are drinking, how many of your friends do you have purely because you drink with them? How many of your friends do you have that you wouldn't see outside of drinking? What that means is that if you decide to stop drinking, there's now nothing you have in common with your friends. Which means you only really were with them because you drank together, okay? That's not a proper relationship. That means you formed a relationship with an altered state of another person so you could do something impulsive that made you a worse version of yourself. That means for as long as you're within that relationship and that relationship doesn't evolve outside of drinking, then that person is going to just keep wanting to bring you back into situations where you're drinking and doing things you know you don't want to do. It's not a very good place to be in. And you either need to evolve these relationships outside of drinking or you need to remove them. I mean, I had this with gaming. I had a lot of friends that I was only really friends with because I played video games with them. And when I stopped, it's like, well, now I'm not really friends with you because we didn't do anything other than play video games together. So you create these relationships, and removing alcohol was probably the biggest thing that made the biggest difference on my life. So that was the end of the video. If you did like the video, please like and subscribe, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next video.